Hello everyone. I'm truly grateful to welcome you back. Today our hearts step once more into the fragile space where love wrestles with conspiracy, betrayal, and the desperate hope of redemption. Close your eyes for a second and picture a quiet dusk settling over the city. Amber street lamps trembling against shadows, warehouse roofs gleaming faintly like watchful eyes, and somewhere in that hushed two souls, CEO James and the gentle LyTuDiep are bracing for a storm they never wished to call their own. What began as an ambitious business venture has twisted into a battle for survival, where every heartbeat is measured between reason and emotion, loyalty and the stubborn spark of humanity that refuses to die. Not long ago, the border separating right from wrong seemed fixed like lines carved in stone. Yet in the last episode, we watched those borders blur the way ink bleeds across wet parchment. Behind that haze stood John, ruthless architect of vengeance, and Trang's father, a man who long ago traded tenderness for control. Together they devised a silent weapon. Trang herself, obedient on the surface, flawlessly poised to slide into James and Diep's circle like a silver needle and pierce precisely where trust is softest. So the stage was set. Night after night, Trang moved through James's timber workshop, her footsteps gentle on sawdust-strewn floors, her voice calm as spring rain. To the untrained eye, she was merely an efficient liaison. Catalogs in hand, contracts tucked beneath her arm, a polite smile lighting her face whenever James offered genuine kindness. Yet beneath that smile war raged. Every moment reminded her that one whispered report could deliver a ruinous blow, toppling reputations, maybe ending lives. She should have felt triumphant. After all, success meant approval from the father whose praise she craved. But something fragile kept stirring inside her, the smallest ember of conscience refusing to be crushed beneath obligations. It happened on a quiet afternoon when golden light poured through high warehouse windows. James was bent over shipping manifests, sleeves rolled, brow furrowed in honest concentration. Diep stood nearby, gently teasing him about the smudge of grease on his cheek, her laughter catching in the echoes of industrious clatter. In that instant, the soft exchange of warmth Trang had never been allowed to feel. Her mission cracked. Memories surfaced. A little girl once taught to honor truth, a father who had preached integrity before the world turned him hard. She realized that obedient facades might win battles, but never peace. She could not let innocent blood stain her hands. That evening, Trang sent James a discreet message, asking him to meet at the workshop long after the machines had fallen silent. The moon was thin, a silver hook in a velvet sky when he arrived. Between rows of stacked timber, she spoke in a hushed rush, every word trembling with the urgency of someone who has just chosen light over darkness. She warned him the next shipment could be sabotage, urged him to shield Diep from public view, begged him to stay vigilant even with those he believed loyal. James listened, surprise flickering into gratitude. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder, promising both caution and forgiveness. For the first time in months, Trang exhaled without feeling the chill of guilt clawing at her throat. But fate, cruelly observant, was already tightening its net. Somewhere across the city, her father, an old wolf who sensed weather by scent, noticed a deviation in his daughter's routine. A longer lunch break, a quieter phone call, a softness returning to eyes that once shone like polished steel. Suspicion, once lit, became wildfire. He tracked her movements, uncovered her clandestine meeting, and the revelation struck him harder than any physical blow. Betrayal from strangers he could endure. Betrayal from his own flesh was unthinkable. Fury bloomed. His call to John sliced through the night like a siren. Words were few, their venom unspoken yet understood. The plan would accelerate. Hesitation was dead weight, mercy a forgotten luxury. Within hours, John's wounded pride twisted into murderous resolve. No more careful staging, no more patient waiting. He demanded blood that very night. Diep, he decreed, would be the first to vanish. James would follow, broken by grief or bullets, whichever silenced him faster. Yet John underestimated the storm brewing behind James's clear eyes. Even as the order went out, James was already quietly rallying allies within a special task force that had shadowed John's illegal trades for months. Lines were drawn with invisible ink. Phone calls threaded a web between evidence, strategy, and the fragile beating hearts at the story's center. From this moment forward, the conflict would no longer belong to three individuals alone. Light and darkness were gathering armies, and every soul caught between them would have to decide where to stand. As midnight deepened, Trang lay restless in a rented room, the ceiling above her still and heavy with impending consequences. She thought of her father, once her hero, now the figure she must oppose, and wondered if the love that shaped her childhood could ever guide him back. Across town, Diep brushed a loose strand of hair from her tired face, unaware of the crimson thread tightening around her destiny. And James, pacing with controlled urgency, mapped every potential route of escape he could offer the woman he loved. Outside, a cold wind rattled tin roofs and whispered down narrow alleys, carrying the scent of rain and the promise that by sunrise nothing would be the same. Tomorrow may demand impossible courage. Tonight offers only the fragile quiet before the clash. Stay with me. Breathe in this silence, feel your pulse drum with theirs, and prepare, because the first blow is already descending and the race for salvation has begun. If your heart trembles with dread and hope for James, Diep, and Trang, lend them your strength in the comments below. The forest was thick, humid, and hauntingly quiet, except for the crashing of Diep's rapid steps as she stumbled through the undergrowth, her breath ragged, her heart on the edge of collapse. Every time her injured foot touched the ground, a jolt of pain shot through her leg like lightning, but she refused to stop. Her survival depended on every step. The voices behind her grew louder, more frantic, more determined. They were gaining on her, and she knew it. But deeper than fear, stronger than pain, was a desperate hope, a fragile, flickering flame that James might come. That maybe, just maybe, he would find her before it was too late. In the distance, Diep could still hear the chaos she'd fled. Her aunts screaming, the sound of furniture toppling, the horrible shouts of strangers invading what was once a safe haven. Tears welled in her eyes, not just from fear or exhaustion, but from the realization that her world, already shaken by betrayal and loss, was falling apart completely. Her hand pressed against her ribs as she struggled through the branches. Every breath felt like it was being stolen from her. But she kept running, even as her strength dwindled. Elsewhere, James's car tore down the narrow dirt road toward the forest. He gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled hands, his mind flooded with images of Diep, alone, terrified, hunted. Her aunt's broken voice still echoed in his ears. They came. They were after Diep. She ran into the forest. Each word was a blade to his heart. Every second felt like a lifetime. James didn't care about his injuries, or that his vision blurred slightly from the pain. Nothing mattered except getting to her. He'd already lost too much in life. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her too. The car skidded to a stop at the edge of the trail, and James didn't hesitate. He sprinted into the trees, dodging vines and leaping over rocks, ignoring the sharp branches that tore at his clothes and skin. He wasn't running blindly. He was tracing every clue, every disturbance in the earth that hinted at where she had gone. Bent grass, broken twigs, faint imprints in the mud. James followed them like lifelines. Farther ahead, Diep finally collapsed beside a fallen tree, her chest heaving violently, her ankles swollen and nearly useless. She couldn't go any further. She pressed her back against the tree and tried to slow her breathing. She had to stay quiet. She had to stay invisible. But the footsteps were close. So close, she could hear the snapping of branches, the curse words muttered under breath. They were hunting her like an animal. She reached into her small bag, trembling, her fingers brushing the few herbs she had gathered earlier, completely useless now. There was nothing to protect her. She whispered James's name softly, as if calling him through the trees. Maybe it was a prayer. Maybe it was hope refusing to die. And then a noise, not the voice of her pursuers. It was different, familiar. A name called out, strained and desperate. Diep. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned her head toward the sound. James, she whispered, barely audible. Diep, where are you? His voice rang out again, somewhere through the thick trees. The thugs heard it too. One of them cursed, he's here. That damn CEO. Their pace quickened. They knew they had only seconds before James reached her. Diep, using the last ounce of strength she had, pushed herself up, limping forward again, trying to stay ahead. James crashed through the underbrush, his eyes wild with panic, scanning every shadow. And then he saw her, just a flicker of movement between two trees, her figure swaying, broken but still moving. "Diep," he shouted again, this time louder, closer. "James," she cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. But between them, the pursuers emerged, 3 of them. One turned, spotted James, and without hesitation pulled a blade from his belt. "You shouldn't have come here," he hissed. James didn't wait. His body moved instinctively, charging forward, fighting not out of anger, but out of love, raw, consuming love that gave him the strength to face anything. He struck the first man with the force of all his rage, sending him crashing into a tree. Another tried to tackle him, but James ducked, twisted, and threw him off balance. Diep watched through blurred vision as the man she loved fought like a storm unleashed. She wanted to scream for him to stop, to run, but she knew there was no other way. James wasn't going to leave her behind, not again, not ever. Within minutes, the forest was filled with the chaos of shouts, punches, and falling bodies. The final man lunged at James, knocking him to the ground. They struggled, fists flying, until James landed a brutal elbow that sent the attacker collapsing into the leaves. Breathing heavily, James staggered to his feet and ran to Diep. He fell to his knees beside her, his arms wrapping around her trembling body. "I've got you," he whispered, voice cracking. "You're safe now. I'm here." Diep collapsed into his arms, sobbing. "I was so scared they almost." "Shoo," he murmured, holding her tightly. "No one's going to hurt you now. I promise." But their ordeal wasn't over. In the distance, more voices echoed. Reinforcements were coming. John was not done. James scooped Diep into his arms despite his pain, despite the weight. He started moving again, this time not running from fear, but towards safety. And somewhere behind them, the flashing lights of the police task force began to glow through the trees, slicing the darkness with a promise. Justice was finally coming. Will they escape in time? Will John's wrath finally be brought to an end? And will Diep and James ever find peace in a world torn by secrets and pain? James held Diep in his arms as he stumbled through the dense forest. Every step felt heavier than the last, not just because of Diep's weight, but because of the crushing pain in his own body, the bruises from the fight, the cuts from the branches, the overwhelming fatigue pulling at his legs. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that she was alive, that she was with him, that the woman who had cried out his name in fear now lay against his chest, trembling but breathing. Diep clung to him, her arms weak around his neck, her face buried in his shoulder. Tears streamed down her face silently. She didn't have the strength to sob anymore. She just wanted to stay there, safe, held, loved. She could feel James's heartbeat against her cheek, fast and strong, like a drum calling her back from the edge of terror. Every beat reminded her, you are not alone. He came for you. James's mind raced as he moved through the underbrush. Where was the path? Where were the lights of the task force? The forest around them seemed endless. The sounds of shouting had quieted, but he didn't trust the silence. He didn't trust the dark. He didn't trust anything until they were far, far away. Diep, he whispered, adjusting his grip so she wouldn't slip from his arms. Hold on a little longer, okay? We're almost out. She nodded faintly but didn't speak. Her lips were cold. Her skin was pale. James knew she was going into shock. She needed warmth. She needed water. She needed care he couldn't give her here. Not while they were still running for their lives. Finally, through the thick trees ahead, he saw it, the faint flash of red and blue lights. Police vehicles, sirens in the distance, a safe zone. But as he stepped forward, something shifted behind him. A presence, a rustle too loud to be the wind. He turned quickly, and there he was, John. His face twisted in rage, his clothes torn, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. In his hand, a gun, pointed directly at James. I warned you, John spat. I told you to stay out of this. You should have listened, James. James stepped backward slowly, shielding Diep with his body. He could feel her breathing speed up again. He spoke softly, firmly. "John, it's over. The police are here. If you do this, they'll never let you walk free." John's laugh was hollow dark. "Free? You think I care about freedom now? I've already lost everything. Thanks to her." He gestured violently at Diep. "And you, the mighty James, always playing the hero, always pretending to care. You were supposed to help me. You betrayed me for her." James's voice was ice. "You betrayed yourself. You used people. You destroyed lives. You hurt the woman I love." The last words hung in the air like thunder. John's face flickered, anger giving way to something else. Bitterness, jealousy, pain. She was nothing. A poor girl, a burden, a means to an end. "Don't you dare speak about her that way," James growled. "Diep is more than you'll ever be. She's kind, strong, brave, everything you're not." John's hand shook, the gun wavering slightly. Diep opened her mouth, barely able to speak. "Please don't do this," she whispered. Her voice cracked with weakness. "It doesn't have to end like this, John." That moment of hesitation was enough. From behind the trees, a shout rang out. "Drop the weapon!" Flashlights burst through the leaves, blinding and sudden. The police task force moved in, guns drawn, voices firm and commanding. Hands in the air. "Drop it now." John's eyes widened. Panic surged in his face. For a second, it seemed like he might shoot. But then his hand dropped. The gun clattered to the ground. James didn't breathe until the cuffs clicked around John's wrists, and he was dragged away. Screaming, cursing, eyes wild. "This isn't over. You hear me? It's never over." But it was. James fell to his knees, clutching Diep tightly. She closed her eyes, tears falling again. Not from fear now, but from overwhelming release. The nightmare was over. Paramedics rushed forward. They placed oxygen on Diep, wrapped her in a blanket, checked her pulse. One medic gently urged James to let go, to let them help her, but James's arms resisted. It took a long moment before he finally released her hand, his fingers brushing her face softly. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered. "I'm right here." They were loaded into an ambulance. The siren howled as the vehicle drove them toward the city, toward safety, toward a fragile new beginning. Inside, James sat beside Diep, holding her hand the entire way. He didn't speak much, just stared at her, eyes filled with emotion too deep for words. At the hospital, Diep was treated for her injuries, bruises, exhaustion, a twisted ankle, severe stress. James stayed by her side the entire night, refusing to leave even for a moment. He sat in a chair by her bed, his hand in hers, whispering softly when she stirred in her sleep. And when the morning light filtered through the hospital window, golden and soft, Diep opened her eyes. James was there. She blinked slowly, then whispered, "You stayed." He smiled, his voice gentle, breaking slightly. "Of course, I always will." Diep's eyes filled with tears, not from fear or pain this time, but from the overwhelming feeling of being seen, being loved. "James," she whispered, "I thought you hated me. After everything, I thought you left." He shook his head slowly. "I never hated you. I hated myself for not protecting you sooner, for not seeing how deep the hurt went, for choosing silence when I should have chosen you." She reached up and touched his cheek, her fingers barely able to lift. "You came back." "I always will," he said again, leaning forward to rest his forehead against hers. "You're not just someone I care about. You're the reason I still breathe." For a long time, they stayed like that, silent, connected, safe. And outside the room, life moved on. News reports buzzed about John's arrest, about his crimes, about the woman who survived it all. But inside that hospital room, none of that mattered. All that existed was James and Diep, two broken souls who found healing in each other. Their journey wasn't over. There were still wounds to mend, scars to carry. But for the first time in a long time, there was peace, and a promise of a future. "Let me know when you're ready." The days that followed were slow, heavy, and quiet. After the chaos and rescue, the world seemed to hold its breath. Diep remained in the hospital, her body healing slowly, but her mind, that was a different journey. James visited her every morning before the sun rose and stayed long into the night. Sometimes he spoke gentle, low words about the day, about old memories, or just about the way the rain looked on the hospital window. Other times he said nothing, just held her hand and sat with her through the silence. Diep didn't say much at first. She spent hours staring out of the window, watching clouds drift by. Her body was still weak, and her voice came out soft, almost uncertain, as if she wasn't sure if she was allowed to speak anymore. The trauma had wrapped around her like a shadow, and though she was free from danger, the fear still lived in her bones. But James was patient. One morning, as the light poured through the window in soft golden beams, Diep finally turned to him. Her eyes were filled with something new, something raw. "James," she whispered, "do you really mean it? Everything you said that night." James looked up from the book he had been reading to her and nodded slowly. Every word. Diep blinked, her hands trembling slightly on the blanket. "Then why didn't you say it before? Why didn't you fight for me?" James's throat tightened. He set the book down and moved closer to the bed, taking her hand gently in both of his. "Because I was a coward," he said softly. "Because I thought loving you was dangerous. Because I was afraid of what it would cost me, the company, my image, my pride. And because I didn't believe I deserved someone like you." Tears slipped down Diep's cheeks. "I thought I was the one who wasn't enough, that I was a burden, that you left because I was too broken to be loved." "No," James said quickly, leaning forward, his voice cracking. "You were never the burden. You were the light. I was just too blind to see it, until I almost lost you." They both cried, silently, holding on to each other like lifelines in a storm. It took weeks for Diep to regain her strength. With each passing day, James was there, helping her sit up, bringing her her favorite food, reading poetry, sharing gentle jokes. He brought her small flowers from the hospital garden, placed beside her bed every morning. He would never say it out loud, but he was trying to make up for all the time he had failed her. One afternoon, as Diep walked slowly down the hallway with the help of a nurse, she paused and looked at James. Her steps were wobbly, but her eyes were steady. "Do you still want me in your life, now that everything's changed?" James didn't even hesitate. He stepped forward and gently took her hand. "More than ever. You're not a weakness, Diep. You're the reason I'm stronger now. You're not just part of my life, you are my life." Diep looked down at their joined hands. She had never felt so fragile, and yet so held. "I don't know how to trust again," she whispered. "Not just you, anyone." James nodded. "That's okay. Then I'll wait. I'll earn it. Every day. As long as it takes." Diep smiled faintly, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, there was light behind her eyes. Meanwhile, the world outside kept turning. The media went wild with the story. Business tycoon's hidden scandal, the dark secrets behind power, and the CEO who chose love. Reporters hounded the hospital, speculating about James's resignation, the board's fury, and the collapse of the company's image. But James didn't care. He didn't show up for meetings. He didn't return calls. He wasn't interested in saving his name. He was too busy saving a life. Diep's. One night, the board called an emergency meeting. They offered him a choice: step down quietly, hand over the reins, and save what remained of the company's reputation, or face legal and financial disaster. James looked around the long table of cold, ambitious faces. Then he looked out the window, where Diep waited in the hospital garden under a blanket. "I built this company from nothing," James said slowly. "But I'm not sacrificing the one person who taught me how to feel again, just to keep a crown I no longer want." And with that, he walked away. Weeks passed. Spring bloomed in the city. Diep was discharged from the hospital, still healing but able to walk. She returned to a small apartment James had found for her, quiet, safe, surrounded by gentle sunlight and soft curtains. James didn't move in, though. He knew she needed space, time, room to breathe. But he came by every day. Some days they sat together in silence. Other days they laughed, soft, broken laughter that mended something inside them both. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of red and gold, Diep invited James onto the balcony. They sat side by side, wrapped in warm blankets. Do you ever think about what could have happened? Diep asked. If you hadn't come in time. James looked at her, his jaw tight. Every day. And every day I thank the stars that I got there when I did. Diep turned to him, her eyes shining. I still have nightmares. I still wake up thinking I'm back there. And then, I remember you. Your voice. Your arms. James took her hand, placed it over his heart. You're safe now. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to you. A tear slid down Diep's cheek, and this time she didn't hide it. She let it fall, because healing wasn't about pretending to be okay. It was about being loved even when you're not. James, she said softly, can we start over? Not forget everything, but start from here. From now. He smiled, a smile that reached deep into his soul. Yes, from now. Always from now. And as the city lights flickered below and the stars blinked overhead, James and Diep sat together, two broken people choosing to rebuild. Slowly, patiently, with love. Their pasts were jagged, and their scars would never vanish. But their hearts had found a place to rest, a place to grow, and that was enough. Months had passed. Diep's hair had grown longer again. Her eyes, once hollow and quiet, now held color and strength. Though the nights still brought shadows and fear, the days brought calm, routine, and most importantly, hope. She had begun volunteering at a small community center, helping other women find their voice, their courage, and their strength after facing their own dark stories. She listened, spoke softly, and sometimes just sat with them. She didn't need to explain everything. They could see it in her eyes. She understood. James had transformed too. Not in suits or success or power, but in soul. He had sold off his shares in the company. He donated a large portion of his wealth to shelters and outreach programs for abused women and children. He stepped away from boardrooms and into quiet spaces where he could be useful, not important. One morning, he waited outside the community center, holding a thermos of ginger tea, Diep's favorite. She came out wearing a simple sky blue scarf, her cheeks pink from the breeze. Their eyes met and James smiled. I thought you might want something warm, he said, handing her the cup. Diep took it, smiling back. You always remember. They walked slowly through a quiet park, their fingers brushing, then gently linking. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The kind of touch that meant, I'm here. You're not alone. As they sat down on a wooden bench beneath the blossoming trees, Diep looked up at the sky and whispered, Do you ever think about how much we lost? James was quiet. Then he said, all the time, But I think about what we found, too. You, us, a future that isn't built on power, but peace. Diep nodded slowly. I used to think love had to hurt to be real. That if it didn't break you, it wasn't strong enough. But now, I know better. Real love isn't pain. It's healing. It's calm. It's safe. James turned to her. You saved me, Diep. I thought I was saving you all those months ago. But truth is, you brought me back to life. She smiled gently. Then maybe we saved each other. Later that month, they returned to a place Diep had once feared she'd never see again. Their old rooftop, high above the city, where the wind carried dreams across the skyline. It was night. Stars scattered across the dark velvet sky. Lights blinked in windows far below, and everything felt like a soft hum of peace. James took a deep breath and reached into his coat pocket. Not with fear, not with desperation, but with quiet courage. Inside the small box was no diamond, no flashy display of wealth, just a simple silver ring with a tiny engraved word, hope. He turned to Diep and opened the box, not on one knee, not with a rehearsed speech, but with eyes that had cried for her, arms that had held her through storms, and a heart that had learned how to love through loss. Diep, he said gently, I don't want to own you. I don't want to fix you. I just want to walk beside you. As your friend, as your home, as the one who'll never stop choosing you. Will you marry me? Not as a prince saves a princess, but as two survivors choosing to build something new. Diep didn't say anything for a long moment. Her eyes filled with tears, not of pain but of gratitude. Her hands trembled as she reached for the ring and slid it on herself. Yes, she whispered. Not because I need saving, but because I'm ready to live. And there, under the stars, with the wind brushing past and the city lights dancing beneath them, they didn't kiss like the movies. They just held each other, forever starting, never ending. Dear viewers, this wasn't just a love story. This was a journey of healing, of finding light in the darkest corners of life. It was about choosing each other, even when the past tried to break them apart. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that real love heals, if you've ever held onto someone through the pain and the storm, please like this video, leave a comment below to share your thoughts, and subscribe for more deeply emotional stories that matter. Let's keep telling stories that remind us love doesn't always come easy, but when it's real, it's worth everything. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.